Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Borg Skeptic show. Today we've got a very special episode. We have Lloyd Evans joining us. We also have Susan Brewer as co-host, and we're going to be talking about indoctrination within Jehovah's Witnesses and the effects that can have on a person whilst being indoctrinated, and obviously after waking up and leaving a cult like Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm glad to see that we have quite a few people with us in the chat today. Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. I hope you are all very well. I myself am doing extremely well tonight. I'm very excited for this conversation. So without further ado, I shall bring in Susan and Lloyd. Welcome to the stream.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
I think the pleasure is all ours for having you here, Lloyd. I mean, you are, you're very big on YouTube. You've been doing this a long time. You, I would say, are the biggest voice in the XJW community. So, me and Susan, I think we're very thrilled to be having this conversation with you.
Well, I don't know. I've been doing this for a while now, and I suppose the longer you do it, the more your platform grows, the more your audience grows. And I feel very privileged to be able to do what I do, what I love, and what I feel passionate about as my job. And I'm obviously very, very well supported in terms of patrons, which makes it possible for me to do things I never even dreamt of when I first started the channel. So it's just it's one of those things where it just takes on a life of its own, and if I can help in some way and just provide resources that will help people, then it's job done as far as I'm concerned.
And I think we all thank you very much for the work that you have been doing. I've followed you for many years myself, and it's been great watching your content, watching the work that you do and watching you grow into somebody that has helped thousands of people around the world. And so I would like to say I think that you're a personal hero of mine, and very, very excited for this conversation.
You're very, very generous with your praise, Katie. Thank you. I know what you mean. I always kind of shy away from any suggestion of being any kind of hero or anything, although I do kind of get it because I feel similarly towards people who helped me. I've had the pleasure of meeting in person Paul Grundy, whose website JW Facts was instrumental, along with Crisis of Conscience, in waking me up. So I consider Paul Grundy and Ray Franz as being the two who woke me up and are therefore my heroes. So yeah, I do kind of get it, but it's weird because I don't think of myself as a hero. I just think of myself as someone who's doing the best he can with the tools that he has and with the support that he's been given. So yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah. And we thank you very much for that. So indoctrination then, that's what we were wanting to talk about, and I've been doing quite a bit of work on my channel trying to bring awareness to the effects of indoctrination and how it can lead to religious trauma syndrome, and I just wanted to develop on that thought. I mean, you've had a lot of people on your channel, interviewing a lot of people, speaking to a lot of people, some experts in the field as well. You were, was it Stephen Hassan? I remember watching a video where you were discussing this topic with him. So I was wanting to get your thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, well, it's a big topic, isn't it? I suppose that indoctrination is achieved in a number of different ways. Ultimately, for me, it all boils down to deception, and the stage at which you introduce indoctrination in someone's life may vary, And quite often it's crucial at what stage you introduce this indoctrination as to how well it sticks. Because if you have children, for example, who depend on their parents for accurate information that's going to keep them safe. I mean, it's a survival thing, isn't it? It's kind of very primal. You rely on your parents to keep you alive. So if they tell you something, you just inherently trust whatever they tell you. And so when you drop indoctrination into that kind of scenario, that kind of relationship, it's inevitable that children are going to just soak up whatever information their parents are giving them, even if it is essentially religious dogma. But that's not to say that indoctrination doesn't also work later on in life. Susan's had that experience. Susan was indoctrinated into the Jehovah's Witness faith as an adult, but that there's also a reason behind that. It's not simply a case of just believing what someone's telling you. If you are at a point in your life where you're emotionally vulnerable, if terrible things have happened and someone comes along claiming to have all of the answers, you can sometimes, even as an adult, be in a state where you are more susceptible to persuasion, to indoctrination, just as you would be perhaps as a child. You're in a dependent state because you're not able to process facts and apply critical thinking in the same way.
Yeah, I think it comes down a lot to the critical thinking side, isn't it? It's, we've all had the experience of being Jehovah's Witnesses and, hearing those talks from the platform about, you shouldn't ever be, you shouldn't go into higher education because they're just going to taint your mind. And what they're talking about is critical thinking skills. That's the last thing that any sort of cult really wants you to develop. You've got to bury those questions.
Well, and, Katie and Lloyd, in my case, I studied for 3.5 years before being baptized as a Jehovah's Witness. So as an adult, let's see, what am I trying to say? Indoctrination is such a slow process that one doesn't realize that the indoctrination is taking place, speaking for myself anyway, until it was too late. I was in a cult before I knew I was in a cult, and I was indoctrinated by two people who do not know they are in a cult. So the way the organization puts out the propaganda and the way the material is presented, it's such a slow process. And as Lloyd brought out, if one is emotionally vulnerable, perhaps, such as I was, then there are hot spots that can be touched on. And that critical thinking, before I knew it, had gone out the door. So.
So Lloyd, as I was mentioning, you've had a lot of, you've done a lot of work on this within your channel. Could you, for the viewers, run down the steps that's usually involved for Jehovah's Witnesses in indoctrinating people?
Yeah, it's interesting because, we're again talking about deception, really. We're talking about fooling people. And what's interesting with groups like Jehovah's Witnesses is they, as much as admit in their tools that they give to train preachers, they as much as admit, look, we're going to try and deceive people to at least some degree. But when you're in a cult, the ends always justify the means. So you don't stop and think, oh, maybe it's wrong to be withholding information. Maybe it's wrong for there to be a lack of transparency in a Bible study situation, for example. Maybe we should be upfront about everything at the beginning and let the chips fall where they may. You don't think that way as a Jehovah's Witness, because you realize that the most important thing is to save this person and to get them through Armageddon. So you're willing to go along with the obvious deception. And for me, the quintessential playbook when it comes to Jehovah's Witness indoctrination was the Jade and Nita dramatization at last year's 2020 Always Rejoice convention, because they literally produced dramatizations showing this is how we're going to deceive people. We're going to pretend to show interest. We're going to pretend to be interested in what their ideas are. We're going to ask them questions and sound as though their ideas have merit. And only later are they going to realize that those ideas are completely wrong, and only by accepting our ideas are they going to have this reward of eternal life. So they also had, in the 2020 annual meeting, David Splain was introducing the new Enjoy Life Forever book, and he just let slip casually in his talk that one of the challenges that Jehovah's Witnesses have when they are indoctrinating people in their Bible study arrangement, one of the challenges is figuring out at what point to acknowledge the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses aren't liked, at what point to acknowledge the fact that there is criticism of the organization, and what areas the Bible student should expect to encounter criticism. And David Splain even says, you know, if we bring this up too soon in the Bible study, we might put them off, you know? So what he's saying is, don't bring it up too soon, you know, withhold this information, withhold the fact that there's a lot of criticism of Jehovah's Witnesses, that we're unpopular, that we're controversial, and lead them along into thinking that we're some totally bona fide, legit, mainstream Christian organization about which there are no concerns and no controversies. So again, when you're watching that sort of material, or you're in the audience watching David Splain say all this as a Jehovah's Witness, it's all totally fine, because you're thinking, well, yes, it's sort of sneaky, but the main thing is that we get them baptized, we get them into the truth, and then they can survive Armageddon, and we'll figure out all of the dishonesty later. At least they're alive, at least they've made it. Yeah.
Lloyd, isn't that the same video in which Splain even brings up how far into the study before you bring up aligning oneself with the organization?
Yes. Well, yeah, he brings up a number of areas in which there are so-called challenges when it comes to Bible studies. Yes, and this is another area that you've touched on there, Susan. You know, to what extent does an organization control one's thinking? To what extent does an organization to what extent is an organization important in relation to one's family? You know, to what extent is an organization going to take precedent over one's family and friends? And that's another area in which, during the Always Rejoice 2020 convention, we learned in the Jade and Nita dramatizations and in the talks accompanying those dramatizations, you know what? We need to give these people new friends. We need to wean them off their existing social structure and replace it with only bona fide good association from the congregation. We're not going to be upfront about this in the initial conversations when Jade approaches Nita on the carts. We're not going to say at that moment when the study is agreed upon, by the way, you're going to have to at some point get rid of all your friends and have only Jehovah's Witnesses as friends. We're going to just sneak that in incrementally, you know, as the study progresses. Again, this is deception. You know, this is not what they would call an interactive Bible study. This is literally recruiting someone into an organization by mis-selling what that organization is and what that organization requires of someone.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the Jade and Nita, because I one of my best videos that I've done for viewers and that was actually the Jade and Nita special that I did, and you know, I was actually quite stunned to see that, because it was it was like a walk back down memory lane. Remembering exactly what it was that we were taught every single week, with the replays on the stage where you're pretending to be to go on the door-to-door work and that. And back then we like never even thought of it as we're indoctrinating these people, we're deceiving these people. It was, we've got to do this, we've got to save them, we're helping them out, we're bringing them into the truth and all of that. But when you look at the Jade and Nita, you can see quite clearly, no, we're deceiving people. That's what the aim of the game was. We needed to very slowly put those blinkers onto people so that they didn't, they don't stray from the truth.
Yeah.
And I quite like the phrase that you use there as well. Weaning them off of the society. I think that's a very accurate phrase for what for what Jehovah's Witnesses do.
Well, they even say, you need to put on the new personality. Well, if you're putting on a new personality, that means you're getting rid of your personality. And if you're getting rid of your personality, it means you are literally becoming a different person. And again, that is not something that they're going to say during that initial interaction. Oh, would you like a Bible study? Oh, what's involved? Oh, well, you're going to basically be required to change who you are and no longer be you. It'll be fun.
Become JW.
Oh, yeah.
They're never going to say that.
Yeah. Now, when I remarked at one time that I was content with the personality I have, I was encouraged with the phrase, "Oh, but you will become the best version of yourself you can possibly be."
Yeah.
So.
Well, the best person of yourself that they would like you to be. In other words,
a
compliant drone.
Yeah.
Who does everything that the organisation requires of them. Yeah.
There's actually someone in the chat which is mentioning quite a good analogy there that I quite like. Raven Tree Frog says, the indoctrination process is like getting into a swimming pool a bit at a time. So you get climatized to the temperature. In this case, mentally climatized.
That's very good.
The kiddies pool, and that the temperature is not coming necessarily from the water heating system.
Oh boy. I don't even know what to say after that. Oh my.
Nice mental image. Nice mental image for a Monday. But no, it's true, isn't it? It's all very gradual, and just as it's gradual to get indoctrinated, it's also gradual to get de-indoctrinated. And I've interviewed so many people now, and what's interesting is that whenever I ask the question, when did the penny drop? I get so many different answers, but nearly always it turns out that it's not just a single eureka moment. I interviewed Susan, and there was that fantastic line where she says, I said to my husband, "Oh my God, I'm in a cult."
You left a word out, but yeah.
Even that, there was another word in there as well. Even then, there were incremental points leading up to that conversation, Susan, between you and your husband, that were suggesting very strongly that something was wrong. And, for example, Mark said that later in conversation, because we were talking about this between the team, he says he can still remember you coming up to him at the trial of Roderick Watkins and saying, "I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up for this." So that's not the sort of thing that a totally indoctrinated, totally compliant, totally devout Jehovah's Witness says to a total stranger, which Mark was at that point, in a situation where the organization is under attack. "I didn't sign up for this." So there's clearly even though you had this, moment with your husband, there was still this trajectory, wasn't there? There was this kind of almost linear journey from, indoctrinated to fully awakened. And I've, again, interviewed dozens of people, and it's almost the same for all of them. There's not one single moment where you just flick a switch from being, Jehovah's Witness Lloyd to apostate Lloyd. I can remember writing a letter. I wrote a number of letters to my wife when I was having this kind of initial crisis of faith. And I think I said in that letter, I don't think I'm going to be a Jehovah's Witness for much longer. But don't worry, I would never be an apostate. I would never be the sort of person who tries to turn people away from the organization, So, there was clearly, again, a journey that I was going down, and I had no idea at that time how I would end up feeling by the end of it. So just as it takes a while to indoctrinate someone, it also takes a while for someone to de-indoctrinate themselves, I would suggest.
And it can take years. I mean, for me, it was nearly 10 years to de-indoctrinate from the religion, and even then, there's still aspects of the cult self that are still there, that maybe will never go away, and will always linger in the background until the day that I die. And I think that's probably the same for a lot of people. It's not something that's going to be over, overnight, and you just wake up the next morning and you're back to your original self again.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Lloyd, you brought out it was a sort of a linear fashion. Indeed, after that trial, you may recall in our interview, I brought out that I went back to being a good witness.
Yeah.
Although I had remarked to Mark, I did not sign up for this. Although we had that wonderful visit and he and I continued to communicate. It was months before I ventured to watch your channel, and I don't need to repeat that story here. They can see it on your channel. But yes, it was definitely a linear fashion, and even going through that phase of I don't want this to not be true.
Yeah.
And so even the short time I was in, going in and already in my 6th decade of life, I just really, really wanted it to be true. And
this is where the cognitive dissonance comes in. And
yes.
Cognitive dissonance is just a fascinating thing. I've learned more about it, again, through doing interviews and, speaking to experts on cognitive dissonance. And it turns out that it's a good thing to have cognitive dissonance. We always think of cognitive dissonance as being something negative, but in actual fact, it's kind of a survival mechanism that we have. And if we didn't have it, there would be chaos, because in order to change someone's mind, you just need to tell them a conflicting piece of information, and immediately they would switch to believing your position. There needs to be a bit of pushback. You need to have like a construct of reality that makes sense to you, so that when someone tells you something that conflicts with your construct of reality, you feel agitated and you don't want to believe them. Because if you did want to believe them and you just immediately went to believing what they were telling you, it would compromise your entire sense of self. We are what our reality is, if that makes sense. We need our sense of reality to have a sense of self. And so cognitive dissonance is like a defense mechanism that protects our sense of self. That's how it was explained to me, at least. But unfortunately, it also means that when someone gets into a cult, it's very, very difficult to get them out of it, even if it's a sense of self or a reality construct that is ill-founded, that is actually serving an organization rather than serving the person.
Yeah.
It's still difficult for that very reason to extract people from that situation.
So it's about finding a balance with the cognitive dissonance. You need it for survival, but organisations such as Jehovah's Witnesses will over-sensitize that cognitive dissonance.
Well, it explains why it takes so long. You can overcome cognitive dissonance, but it requires a lot of time and a lot of introspection and a lot of asking very, very difficult questions. It's not, again, like flicking a switch. If it were like flicking a switch, then you could convince someone of almost anything just by saying something that conflicts with what their previous understanding of reality was. And that's clearly not the world that we live in. I mean, in any kind of sense, when you look at the political world, if you could imagine changing someone from, let's say, Republican to Democrat just by telling them, oh, you should know this. Oh, right, in that case, I'm going to switch allegiances. It's just not how it works, is it? You need to have, as kind of a defense mechanism, like a firewall almost, this resistance, even if the information is valid, in order to preserve your sense of self. Because otherwise, who are you? Who are we if reality is so malleable in our minds,
Yeah.
That's a very good point, and I'm gonna, I've talked on my channel before about how in a negative way with cognitive dissonance, and obviously you can have a negative aspect to it, but I'm gonna take what you said under advisement, because that makes a lot of sense, and I've never thought about it in that way before.
Yeah, it was revelatory to me. Yeah.
Before I was familiar with the term cognitive dissonance, when I was going through my awakening process, I began using the word that I am disillusioned. And a few close to me, non-JWs, were taking that in a negative sense. And I would take a moment and explain, no. Disillusionment is a good thing, because it means I'm no longer operating under an illusion. So in this case, this is a positive thing here. So, yeah. I once heard a scholar remark, and his name won't come to me, but he said that the sign of a fully developed, mature brain with the ability to reason is one that can hold two contradictory thoughts at the same time and maintain balance. So for me, cognitive dissonance was like the flip side of that coin. The cognitive dissonance took away my ability to use critical thinking and to hold two contradictory thoughts at the same time and maintain my balance. Now, I'm coming out of that. Fortunately, it's been almost a year now. But I was wondering, Lloyd, do you, after all this time, do you still, I don't want to get too personal, but do you still have any issues along those lines?
Well, I made a video about this. Obviously, we've been beset by earthquakes here in Croatia. But I think it was back in March of 2020, we had a large earthquake in Zagreb. So it wasn't where I live. Zagreb is maybe an hour north, but because it was large enough, we still felt it quite severely here where I live, and it woke us up early in the morning. And bear in mind that at that point, the pandemic had only just started, or had only recently been announced, and then you're being woken up by your house shaking. And the way I describe it, it's like Armageddon bingo. How many boxes can we check off here? That we've got pandemic, we've got earthquake. What else? Is there going to be a tank rolling down my street any moment? And just for a split second, I'm not even going to say it was a second. It was just barely long enough to register in my mind that yes, this thought did flicker. There was a synapse that fired. I don't know how to explain it. Some chemistry kicked in, and just for the briefest of moments, you think, Armageddon, Great Tribulation. What are you doing, Lloyd? You idiot. You total idiot. Here you are with this massive channel turning people away from God's one true organization. They were right all along. And it wasn't even it can't have been even a second. I'm going to say it was less than a second, but it was still, it was long enough for me to register that sort of thought was there. And so I think that tells you everything. I mean, I've been awake now for, I've been doing my activism coming up on 10 years. This year will be my 10-year anniversary of doing activism. I've written 2 books. I've made hundreds of videos. I've been on television twice talking against the organization. I've been a core participant in an investigation against Jehovah's Witnesses. And if even someone with that sort of track record could be conscious of that kind of thought, then I can fully sympathize with anyone who struggles, because ultimately the thing to remember is that our brains are like computers, aren't they? They're very, very sophisticated computers, and they were coded, they were programmed to think a certain way. In my case, for decades, and you can overwrite that coding, and you can have all of the information that tells you this was wrong and this was incorrect, and now what I know to be true is correct, or is at least more correct than what I had before. But the old coding, fragments of it, unfortunately, when you go through indoctrination that is as potent and as military grade as what we went through, it's totally to be expected, as far as I'm concerned, that bits of it linger, in whatever form, and manifest themselves in whatever form.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense, because when you do research into neuroscience and how the brain actually works, it is like what you said. It's it's a program which has been coded in. That the neurons make up neural networks, and the Jehovah's Witness cult mentality is an entire neural network which is designed in such a way to become basically the base programming. So you can, as you say, you can overwrite it, you can overlay it with critical thinking and logic and reason. But when things happen, bad things happen, there's always going to be that one neuron to another neuron, which is gonna fire through the through the memory process.
I think that's how actual computers work, isn't it? You can't actually delete something. It says you've deleted it, but all that's happening is that the computer now knows that it can write over, so it starts writing over that parts of the disk, but they're able to recover, aren't they, like images or files, even after they've been deleted by, they have these kind of computer forensics that can piece together what was there before it was deleted. Because I'm not suggesting that I know that that's necessarily exactly how the brain works, but it at least helps me to visualize how it's possible for dogma that is so easily debunked to still have an influence even years after you've rejected it.
Yeah, because all that happens for the neural networks, and this is the research that I've done into neuroscience, is all that happens with those networks is some of them are repurposed, some of the connections are repurposed to make new connections, but a lot of those connections they just become dormant until something, until a memory triggers them. It could be a sound, a feeling, you know, an event that happens. Just something that will trigger that memory will then activate that network again. And as you say, it's usually only for a few seconds. Just enough for it to register before the overlaying network cuts in and goes, "Oh, no, don't think about that. That was the wrong connection that was activated there."
Almost sounds like in the movie The Matrix when you see the cat twice. You know, when you have deja vu, it's like a glitch. I was thinking very much along the lines of Lloyd with the analogy with the computer and how that information can be retrieved. It's, I guess once we get it in our brain, it's just going to be there forever. And
but that doesn't mean that we're doomed or condemned or cursed.
Oh no, and I didn't mean it that way, actually. Yeah.
But that's the good news is that even though it sticks around, it's possible to manage the situation. I mean, it's like
Indeed.
if you sustain a serious injury, let's say you even lose a limb. You know, it's hard, it's difficult. Your life is never completely the same again, but that doesn't mean that you can't learn to manage the situation and learn to live your life in a happy, meaningful, satisfying way. It just means recalibrating things slightly, you know. And so that's
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so that's kind of what we're aiming for, isn't it? When we get out of a cult, it's to not necessarily to completely purge all remnants of our experience or all effects of our experience, so that it never actually happened. It's to kind of grow from it and to say, okay, you know, this happened. But I'm stronger for because it happened. I am who I am because it happened, and I'm not going to let this negative experience have mastery over me to the point where my life is intolerable. So,
and I like that you mentioned stronger, because that's what I was going to say was, you know, when I think back to my time as a Jehovah's Witness and the recovery, you know, coming out of that, I wouldn't change it for the world now, because I look back at that as a strength. It made me a better person. It made me someone who had convictions to help other people. It's a core part of who I actually am now.
Indeed.
I went through a brief period of oh, poor me, why did I let this happen to myself, blah, 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 what benefit has it been? And my husband brought out, well, look what you know that you didn't know before. And look how you can use the knowledge you have gained in that 8-year experience to help others, to either help them escape, help them wake up, or help them to not be indoctrinated to begin with. So it actually turns out that it's a benefit, and I needed him to kind of open my eyes to this is actually a good thing.
Well, your interview has had 27,000 views, Susan, and
Whoa.
You know, so many people have derived, you know, catharsis from hearing your experience, and they've been able to relate to it, and it's helped them to heal from their own experience. So, you know, you've hit the nail on the head there. You know, you're taking a negative and turning it into a positive, aren't you?
Yeah, I bet that really pisses off Tight Pants Tony.
He's usually in an alcohol-induced coma, but yeah, when he's able to string a few thoughts together, it probably would piss him off. Yeah.
This is totally off topic, but do you two ever wonder which one of the governing body or their helper is watching this program right now? You just wonder, hey guys, who's watching?
Goodness knows.
So
a whole team of people probably watching.
They definitely pay more. They definitely pay more attention to apostate content than they're willing to admit. That's one thing I've learned in doing my own activism with, them complaining about my hate speech to ICSA and writing 9-page dossiers with link with quotes from my videos going back several years. So yeah.
Or quotes from your...
Maybe we should do a shout out to them. Hi, service department. How are you doing? Brother so-and-so. Hope you're good today.
Well, even people in the live chat to my live streams were quoted as though they were me. So it wasn't even just about what was said in the videos. It was about what people were saying in the live chat that got included in the dossier. So it's incredible, really.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite sad thinking about it, really, isn't it? That they sit there just scrolling through your videos, watching all of your content, trying to find them couple of different sentences from different parts of the video that they can just string together and incriminate you in some way.
But again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the kind of knowing deceit that's involved in indoctrination. The ends justifies the means. So if you believe that it's God's organization, and when you're a Bethelite, you have to believe that, don't you? Because you're literally committing your life, as in like 6 days a week. I think they get Sundays off, but they have to work at least a little bit on Saturday usually, the Bethelites. So their everyday reality is being kind of in the footsteps of the governing body, or serving very closely to the governing body or the governing body committees. And so, it has to be true for them. And so there any means possible to basically destroy opposers, they're going to take it. And the whole hate speech thing was a fascinating study into just what depths they will sink to in terms of trying to mislead, in this case a legal investigation into child sexual abuse. Anything goes basically when it comes to destroying opposers.
Well, and how I always have to go down the ludicrous avenue on everything. I get really tickled when I think about their helpers, Bethelites watching, because wouldn't it be interesting if they actually became apostates from watching apostate videos on behalf of the governing body? It's like, if this is your assignment at Bethel and you're just constantly watching XJW channels, it seems like maybe after a while, I don't know, maybe the cogs would start turning. And
nothing would surprise me, Susan, at this point. I mean, you have to understand, I've been doing this for a few years now, and just when I think, there's no way this would happen, there's no way I would get a leaked video talking about how Bethelites are masturbating in front of each other. Oh, hang on. That's what I've got. And they're talking about bed linen being used in a strange way. There's no way in the world they would catch a governing body member on a Sunday morning at a liquor store. So I'm constantly being surprised, and I've learned to just go with the flow, And so, if at some point a Bethelite who was assigned to watch my channel reaches out to me and says, "Lloyd, I was one of the ones behind this dossier. I'm ready to talk." I'd be ready to do the interview, and I wouldn't really bat an eyelid, because I've, in a way, had more surprising things come across my desk. And I suppose for me, the really interesting thing would be if we could get. I don't think it's reasonable to get a governing body member anymore. I know we had Ray Franz defect. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think there will be another Ray Franz. I think that the governing body has changed since the Ray Franz era. Because in order to be a governing body member now, we've figured out that you almost uniformly need to spend quite some time in the service department. And in the service department, you learn the very worst of the organization. You see the the child abuse policies. You're involved in the child abuse policies. You're involved yourself in covering up abuse. And it's only after you've spent a while doing that, all of the governing body members have had some involvement in the service department before they were appointed. So they've all got muck on them. It would be very, very difficult for any of them to just do a total U-turn and be treated credibly. But governing body helpers, on the other hand, are a slightly different animal. They can always get out if they wanted to. If they were to awaken, they could conceivably, or one of them could conceivably defect and be clean of involvement in the cover-up of abuse. And it would be easier for them than it would be for a governing body member. So that's one thing that I'm intrigued to see. Again, I've been doing this for 10 years now. I struggle to think that I would still be doing full-time activism another 10 years from now. But I'll at least be doing full-time activism for a few years. And if during that period we could have something like a governing body helper wake up and spill the beans, that would be absolutely fantastic. But what I've learned is never be surprised. You just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I'd love to see that as well. I think it would be it would be a moment, definitely, to to record, definitely. So getting back to indoctrination, I think when you're talking about indoctrination, we need to talk a little bit about child indoctrination, because obviously this is the more dangerous side of being indoctrinated, is when it happens from a very young age. And we've seen in the past year Tony Morris talking about making sure that you start the indoctrination process from the womb onwards. So there's within Jehovah's Witnesses, there isn't really a get out clause for children there. It's pretty much hard indoctrination right from the get go. What are your thoughts on that, Lloyd?
Oh, it's disgusting, isn't it? In fact, if anything, the organisation seems to be getting closer and closer to infant baptism, which it obviously has condemned the Catholic Church for over the years. I think the youngest you can find in the literature, in terms, because obviously they constantly cite experiences of people getting baptised, and I think the youngest you can find is 6. 6 years old. My daughter Jessica is 6 now and will be 7 soon. And 6, you're basically a baby. Yeah. So this again is just overtly hijacking the innocence of childhood and the absence, the vacuum of critical thinking. Jessica doesn't have critical thinking skills. If you could sit her down and basically convince her of almost anything at this stage. So the fact that they could exploit this naivety and this lack of critical thinking and exploit this age group in terms of dragging recruits in. I mean, I'm not saying that the majority of children that get baptized are 6 years old. I'm sure that is kind of the lowest extreme. Probably the majority are at least in their teen years. But even so, how can you possibly hold people to a decision that they're being coerced into making before they're old enough to own a house, be employed? Most countries have laws which prohibit people over the age of 16 from being employed. They have laws against child labour. They have laws against children getting into debt or going to jail There's loads of things that you simply can't happen to you as a child because you're a child, because you're not considered an adult. And yet cults like Jehovah's Witnesses prey on this period and make people commit to their religion for life, so that, for example, someone like me can get baptized at the age of 11, and I am held to that decision, a decision I was making at a time when the teaching was, oh, Armageddon's going to come before the generation that witnessed the events of 1914 die off. Yeah. that was the teaching I signed up to. They're allowed to move the goalposts. I'm apparently not allowed to change my mind. They can change their mind as much as they like, because they're the faithful slave. And who the hell do you think you are, Lloyd Evans? But yeah, it's just totally unfair, the way they hijack the innocence of childhood and blatantly exploit the fact that children don't have the critical thinking skills that adults have. Yeah,
I completely agree with that. And I was baptized myself at 11-year-old as well, like yourself. And in my case, it was one step further than just the indoctrination. I was being sexually abused at for many years before my baptism, since the age of 6. So I was like forced into the baptism. I had absolutely no choice behind that at all, and yet they still held me to that baptism. And and there's many people like myself and like yourself as well, that are then getting shunned later down the line as punishment for a decision that they never even made themselves.
Well, and in the Watchtower study, so often the study would focus on teaching the young ones to make the truth their own. You got to make the truth your own. Then you have Tony Morris on the flip side coming out with his little spiel about, oh, you're 16 and you want a driver's license. Oh, you think you're old enough to drive, but you're not old enough to be baptized and dedicate your life to Jehovah and the organization. I'm like...
blatantly encouraging the blackmailing of children,
Yes.
Shouldn't it be like a profoundly spiritual experience when you commit yourself, when you dedicate yourself to God? What does it have to do with whether you can drive or not? Again, as far as they're concerned, once you hit a certain age, you just have to be a Jehovah's Witness. There isn't any choice in the matter, really. And this is why it's frustrating when you finally do get out and you get apologists saying, oh, you chose this. Why are you complaining about shunning? You signed up for this. You can't sign up for it and then later complain that you're being shunned according to the rules you signed up for. Excuse me, I signed up for The World is Ending when I was age 11, based on a whole bunch of lies and based on things I wasn't told about. I wasn't told about 1975. I wasn't told about 1925. I wasn't told about Mexico, Malawi. I wasn't told that abuse was being covered up. I wasn't told that women were supposed to stay in violent relationships rather than get divorced. So, so many things I wasn't told about, and they dare to tell me that I made a choice, age 11, to get baptized. Or I made a choice to be held to these rules when I'm now 41, So it's ludicrous.
Yeah, ridiculous.
It also with the shunning as well, I mean, it doesn't matter what you sign up for in that, even if you did make the choice. The whole shunning aspect it's against the law. I mean, you've got human rights, which specifically state that you've got freedom to belief and freedom to disbelief as well. And
incidentally, the organisation routinely appeals to these human rights rules regarding freedom of conscience and religion when it comes to fighting cases of persecution, of religious persecution around the world, including cases where, for example, young Jehovah's Witness men have to spend time in jail due to conscientious objection. They'll roll up in the courtroom and say, oh, according to Article 9 of the European Convention on Human Rights, this isn't allowed because everyone has the freedom to express their religious beliefs. And in this case, young Joe Smith doesn't want to fight because it's against his religion, and you all need to respect his religion because that's his human right. They're literally appealing to the same article that they violate through their shunning policy, because the article, as you've said, clearly states you have the right to leave your religion. You have the right to have it, and you have the right to leave it. And if they are actively punishing those who leave their religion, then they are violating their human rights.
Yeah. You know, so, and, you know, it's just cherry picking, blatant cherry picking of the, you know, of the human right. And, you know, how dare they say that they have the right to something and then, you know, reject other people's rights for that. I think I was reading a news article the other day about how Jehovah's Witnesses have just been fined quite a substantial amount of money because of their breaking the human rights in that way.
Yeah, that's in Belgium. We covered this on JW Watch, and it's very interesting because, you know, lots of countries now have anti-discrimination laws, but in Belgium, a friend of mine, Patrick Hayek, has decided to apply these or pursue the organization using these discrimination laws. And initially he started the lawsuit with his own funds, under his own initiative, and eventually the country's prosecutors took it up themselves. They said, no, we'll handle this, we'll take this up, because this is such a clear-cut case of a religious organization violating the discrimination laws, and that's why they've been fined. So, you know, the organization put forth lawyers. I think they even paid like an outside law firm to represent them. They couldn't do anything because it was literally against the law. There's no real way of arguing their way out of it. And also this lawsuit had been like planned for like 4 or 5 years by very, very clever lawyers, like a team of lawyers, indeed the country's prosecutors. So there was no way out. They just had to receive the verdict. And what Patrick's hoping is that they will appeal it, which will allow him to argue the case in a higher court, which may result in ramifications in other countries beyond Belgium.
Oh, that would be a good step forward for the, you know, the fight for rights of those who are being shunned. I think something that we all look forward to, as if that was going to happen.
Well, indeed, you know, if going to the higher court, a precedent can be set. And once a precedent is set, then some gates can open up. So very much, I'm with Lloyd and the others that are participating in this. I hope they do appeal it.
Yeah. We're getting a little bit of feedback, according to people in the chat.
Yeah, I'm hearing it as well.
Okay, and I'm about to run out of batteries. I may have to sign off.
Okay.
So,
well, thank you very much for joining us, Susan. That was
lovely to see you, Susan.
You too. Love you both.
Yeah, I love Susan. She's I always love having her on the channel. She's you know, a really strong, you know, brilliant person.
Force of nature.
Yeah, so we're coming up to an hour now. I don't know how long you wanted to go on for, Lloyd.
I could maybe do another 10 minutes. It's just that it's midnight here, and I'm also still battling a little bit of flu-ish stuff. So I'm going to have like my tablets and a little bit of a nightcap, and then get myself off to bed. But I can hang around for another 10 minutes, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think we've done a good job at covering indoctrination and that. I would like to talk about a little bit about because obviously we've talked about leaving in Jehovah's Witnesses and recovering from that. But obviously a question that a lot of people have is how do you go about helping your loved ones who are still victims to this indoctrination process?
How do you go about helping your loved ones? You mean who are indoctrinated?
Yeah, those who you've obviously left behind in the organisation.
It really depends on a variety of factors, and for me, a big issue is how much contact is there, or what's the nature of the relationship. If it's someone who, let's say, it's your parents, and you're an adult and you left home years ago, and you maybe see your parents on a weekly or 2 weekly or maybe even a monthly basis, but you don't see them all the time. And let's say they're shunning you. You're not going to have that much opportunity to wake them up at all, are you? They're not in your life. They don't really need to be in your life, at least from their point of view. You've flown the nest, you are your own person, and they kind of are resigned to the fact that they can't control what you do with your life. If, on the other hand, the person that you're trying to salvage is living in your house, let's say it's your partner, it's your spouse, they will probably take a different view, and they will probably be minded to try and salvage you to the faith. At least to some degree. Let's say you have faded, you've become inactive, and you've privately divulged to them that you no longer believe, and it's just understood that you're not going to make a big song and dance so long as you can live authentically. You're going to find a way of functioning as a couple. At least in my case, when I was in that situation, I knew that my wife would be trying to salvage me. I knew that inevitably there would be conversations. I knew she was going to approach me and trying to reason me back into the faith. And then you have an opportunity, I think, to just sow seeds and just to present arguments, present information when you're being approached. But if no one's approaching you, if they're not approaching you, I'm sorry, I just don't see how it's either reasonable or possible or ethical to change someone's mind, because there is no magic wand here. There is no silver bullet to fix these things. In order for someone to wake up to the fact that they're in a cult, they have to be in control of the process. It has to be a journey that they embark upon, that they go down. And you're only in with the slightest chance of steering people in that direction if they're approaching you and if there's a dialogue.
Yeah.
If there's a dialogue, then you can, again, be tactful. You can bide your time, wait for them to come to you. Just be as honest as possible. Be as Socratic as possible. Ask lots of questions. How can we be sure of this? How can we be sure of that? Here's what I'm having a problem with. I want to believe that this is true, but this is I'm seeing this information here which seems to debunk it. Speaking in those terms, I think Anthony Magnabosco, with his street epistemology approach, it's a wonderful approach to take when you're in that sort of situation. There's a book out called How to Have Impossible Conversations, which he's promoting. So he hasn't written it, but he's promoting it. again, there's almost like an art form to persuading someone whose beliefs are diametrically opposed to yours. It's difficult, but it's not completely impossible. But there has to be some kind of dialogue. You can't just ambush someone with information. They have to be in control of the situation. I think one useful strategy, if you are again in the same household, is to show them other cults. And you can do this by recommending that they watch material that deals with, let's say, Scientology. In my own case, I recommended Louis Theroux's documentaries on the Westboro Baptist Church, and I remember Deanna watching those, and she could immediately see the parallels with Jehovah's Witnesses, even though it was a completely different group, just this tiny kind of family cult. I can't even remember where it is now. Is it in Kansas or somewhere like that? There were still parallels. There were still very obvious things that they were doing, the same that what Jehovah's Witnesses are doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a useful way of just at least introducing the person you care about to the concept of cults, because you learn to think of cults in a very dismissive way as a Jehovah's Witness for a very good reason, because you're obviously in a cult and the organization doesn't want to encourage you to think of cults as actually being a thing that that you need to worry about. Sorry, my illness is catching up with me now. But yeah, you're kind of naive to the whole concept of cults, and so if you can kind of at least introduce this idea that there are groups and organizations that make it their business to hijack your mind, and that the way that they do this is basically the same from one group to the next, even though the beliefs and the theology may be dramatically different. When you lift up the hood and look at the engine, it's exactly the same parts.
Yeah.
That's the way I think of it.
That's a good analogy.
That's one way that I think that I know has helped me is, when I was going through this with Deanna, was to say, let's watch this together. It doesn't say anything at all about Jehovah's Witnesses. It's not apostate. It's a BBC documentary about a church in America. What's the worst that could happen, And that helped me, actually. But yeah, just being kind, being respectful, pursuing an epistemological approach to these conversations, not being too blunt or dogmatic or dismissive, but just making it all about honesty, I think, and just saying, look, I want to believe what's true. After all, Jehovah's Witnesses call it the truth.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? I care about what's true. I want to orient my life around what's real and and avoid as much as possible believing in things that aren't real. And I have logical reasons why I can't accept this. So, and I'm open to you explaining why these reasons aren't valid. Let's have a conversation on those grounds. Any kind of conversation along those lines will inevitably lead to them realizing that it's not the truth, but they have to see the honesty and sincerity in you. And so if you're just kind of sneering and dismissive and patronizing, it's just not going to work. And they're going to feel as though they're not in control of the situation, or you're trying to force them down a road that they don't want to go down. They need to feel in control if you're going to stand a chance in hell.
Yeah, and you don't want to, because obviously when we were all Jehovah's Witnesses, we used to have an idea of what people were like when they're not believers, or they're in Satan's world. They're being deluded by Satan. They just want to drag you out of the truth, and affect the way that you think and control you. the last thing you want to do is reinforce any of that, because that's just going to have them bunker down. And
yeah, agreed.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, Lloyd. It's been an absolutely amazing conversation. Really enjoyed it. And obviously, as I said at the beginning, the work that you're doing is absolutely fantastic, and I love following you, and I'm just so glad to see that you've continued on all these years, and
well, thank you for thank you for your support, and thank you for doing what you're doing. And I just regard it as a team effort. We're all doing what we can in our own little way, and it's great that you're having these conversations and doing what you can. I think if everyone just did a little bit, and I don't expect everyone to be an activist, but for those who can be an activist, for those who can, have some kind of influence, you just never know how you're going to affect people and how you're going to improve people's lives. I mean, Susan, again, 27,000 people have seen her interview so far, and you just never know what impact that's going to have and how it might inspire other people to break free in the way that she did. So, yeah, I really regard it as a team effort, and I feel very privileged and honoured to be doing what little I can. So, thank you very much for having me on the show. I've enjoyed it.
And thank you for coming on once again. Absolutely brilliant. So I'll end the show up now. Thank you everyone who's been watching. It's been great to see that there's been so many people in the chat, and I had a great conversation over in the chat as well. I've been watching that throughout the show. So thank you everyone for joining in. If you haven't already, please consider, if you've enjoyed the show, hitting the like and the subscribe button to be notified of all future content. And as always, please remember, ignorance is never bliss. Thank you and good night.